Are you scratching your head at what makes a level feel badass and extraordinary? Well, class, it's definitely a variety of things, but in today's lesson, we'll be exploring level design and how we can elevate your game from a throwaway level to Breath of the Wild's Hyrule Castle. To all of those new to the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe for future videos and design tips. Level design is a broad topic, and we're going to be discussing it broadly, because there's really a lot that goes into level design. It's truly a fusion of elements that together can create engaging and memorable experiences, so let's just jump right into it. First off, make sure your game uses the mechanics you're implementing. Show them off. Design levels that force the player to use your mechanics. Just about every Zelda dungeon forces you to use your equipment to get through it. Platformers and Metroidvanias constantly lead you through gauntlets of jumping sections to showcase the game's fluid movement. If you're going to add wall running, zero gravity, elemental physics, etc., make sure they show up more than once in your game, and make sure you're utilizing show, don't tell. Creating an explosion is a lot more cool than watching one happen in a cutscene. Secondly, it's incredibly important to be as efficient as possible. Don't pad out your game with extra mechanics or fluffy side quests. If your game really doesn't need crafting, don't add crafting. Your time developing is incredibly valuable, and that's why it's important to also reuse assets and areas. Making bilinear or open levels allows for backtracking through sections, allowing you to utilize the same area more than once, and in addition, you can repurpose that area to reinforce your different mechanics. Look at the Halo franchise, where you go in one way easily, but end up fighting your way out later. Every asset and area in your game should be relevant and give as much value to your game that you can reasonably squeeze out of it. Next on the list is super important. Make sure your levels have visual cues and flow. If a player gets lost in your level, and that wasn't the intention, you probably don't have enough ways to get your player on the right track. The most common ways to point players in the right direction are lighting and displaying a specific vibrant color, like what they do in the Uncharted series. That said, don't be afraid to add a little bit of disorientation or chaos to the mix, especially if that's how you want the player to feel. Chaos can be a lot of fun when handled respectfully. Speaking of that little tidbit, the next big thing you should consider in level design is how you want your player to feel. What emotions are you trying to evoke? That should be one of the first questions you ask when plotting out a level. Do you want the player to feel happy and excited, or genuinely horrified? Architecture is a great way to evoke emotion. Low ceilings and tight hallways can give the player a sense of dread and claustrophobia, and maybe when they come out of that into the open world, you want them to feel relief and joy. Emotions can help with pacing your narrative and driving your game forward. When you lose your favorite horse in the world, I know I felt more incentivized to fight the last Colossus. Next up is, make sure you empower your player. I know as developers and writers, we want our main characters to suffer and go through ordeals, but it's very important to occasionally reward your players with easy challenges that make them feel good about their progress. Even in Dark Souls, the game that's known to be hard has moments and enemies that are easy to backstab or take down. It feels good to blow shit up and narrowly escape in an action sequence. Another great way to empower your players is to make their choices matter, whether it's assassinating someone in a certain way or choosing to nuke a small town. Make sure you're giving that escapism that your player desperately craves, because that's almost certainly why they're playing to begin with. Which leads me to my next tip: let your players choose the difficulty of your game. If a player finds that your platforming level is easy, that's okay, because they're having problems getting that extra collectible to 100% the level. Look at Mario Kart. You can stay on the track, or you can take the risky shortcut. For more experienced or daring players, they're adding that difficulty to the level. Take a look at Dark Souls. You can go to certain areas wildly unprepared and make it challenging, or you can make that same area easier by leveling up more before entering. Don't you think it's a little bit weird that most games have a difficulty screen before you've even played through the tutorial? Try breaking that mold and brainstorm more ways your players can add difficulty to the game. Next up, please don't add loads of text to explain simple mechanics. If you flash a button you're supposed to press and your character jumps or shoots their gun, congratulations, you just explained it without bringing up a paragraphed explanation. The more your players can self-discover mechanics, the better. It makes them feel clever and more interested in continuing. Trust your player and trust that they'll figure it out. And use discretion before your tutorial becomes a short novella. It's important as well to continue teaching players as they go. Zelda games do this wonderfully. As you go through dungeons and even later dungeons, you constantly learn new, innovative ways to use your equipment. This keeps the game feeling fresh and reinforces those mechanics you already know, expanding their use. Now, this last tip is a hard one, but it's vital to making your levels stand out above the rest of the crowd, and that is take some fucking risks. The last thing you want is your game to become predictable, which means it's probably already too repetitive. Break the routine. If you follow the graph that everyone knows, where it's just building up and up through a level, players are gonna know what's coming before they're supposed to. How many times did you find a stock load of ammo right before you fight a boss? A lot of players are gonna see those resources and be like, oh, there's a boss coming up. You gotta find ways to surprise your players. Take a look at Hades. The first 2 boss fights have you fighting one person. Then the first time you get to the end of Elysium, there's 2 opponents waiting for you. Hot damn, are you in trouble? It's what makes the Ornstein and Smoke fight such a great fight. And depending on which one you kill first, changes the fight more. What a twist! When you're designing a level, try to think outside the box. Because if you don't, you just have a box. And boxes are boring. Turn your box into a goddamn secret base or a castle. Innovation always requires a little risk, but if you never playtest or try out your crazy ideas, you might be missing something special that turns your throwaway level into Breath of the Wild's Hyrule Castle. Now, before we end today's class, just remember that not everything is set in stone. Rules are meant to be played with and broken. Just remember, these are core concepts to keep in mind while you level design, but they're never meant to shackle your creative spirit. These are just level design tips that will surely help make your game great.